Hey guys, Ru here with another video for Blender, and this one's gonna be a bit more about Photoshop than Blender, but this model was created in Blender and also it was rendered in Blender in cycles, so it's technically a Blender video. But I wanted to talk about how to create amazing renders, how to create those cinematic renders that we all want, and how to edit them in Photoshop, because if you think that you can get a perfect render in Blender, you've got another thing coming. You need to learn how to edit your renders if you really want to push your portfolio to another level. Otherwise, you're just gonna stay average. So it's up to you. Basically, it doesn't have to be Photoshop. It can be Affinity Photo. I don't care what it is. It can be GIMP, but editing renders is not important. Yeah, it's essential. Okay. Just 2 words before we start, guys. We got a Patreon together with Josh at Blender Bros. So, link in the video description. Have a look. Now, if you would like to learn more about editing, rendering, lighting setups, etc., almost every single course we made, like the Mac course or like the GAN course, the Create course, or the Ultimate Guide to Hard Ups and Box Cutter courses, they almost all of them contain these features. So go on our website blenderbros.com, Gumroad or Blender Market and have a look. Render from Blender is just an ingredient, okay? You need to cook it, right? And to cook it, you need the editing program. So this is a finished render, and I was going for kind of high motion kind of capture. So the background, of course, is blurred, and edges of the model are blurred slightly as well, manual in Photoshop. Of course, there is color grading, some film grain, etc. So sharpening, whatnot. So let me show you by turning off the layers from the top what I've done. Okay, so this one, the top stuff is quite simple. It's just the text, so I'm gonna turn it off. It's just a text, right? And now text is important because you see without a text, these corners are kind of empty, and the image is extremely left heavy, which means that the contrast and detail is gonna pull you here, gonna keep you here, and the tail is gonna become, well, redundant, which means almost half the image is gonna be unimportant. By adding the text, you force people to actually look and sort of lock them in this triangle, or even there's a triangle here, there's a triangle here, there's a triangle here. Triangles are very powerful forms. The whole shape is a triangle as well. There's a triangle in here opposing this triangle. So let me just actually grab... let me do it properly, guys. I'm gonna grab the another layer, and I'm gonna show you what I mean. So look at this. You got a triangle here. This one triangle, right? You got a triangle here. It's another triangle, okay? You got a triangle here between these, and you got another triangle here, okay? Almost a pentagon. So anyway, triangles are extremely important in design, and they're very powerful diagonal lines. They're gonna pull you around, and because I'm placing this text, strategically, it's gonna pull your eyes here and make you flow, kind of circle around, and you're gonna get stuck in this image like a shit in the ice crack. You know what I mean? And that's the point of keeping you in here and making you circulate. All right, this point being brighter is also not accidental. It's supposed to pull you back, pull you back to the end of the model. The coloring of the model, everything is actually deliberate, and the balance of tones, black versus bright. And I was thinking about it when I was creating it, taking into consideration all the lights and everything. So then of course, when you create a render and you bring it to Photoshop, you need to sort of balance everything that you have on screen, sort of think ahead. You need to think ahead what you want to do with this model, okay? How you want to render it, how you going to position it, how you going to frame the camera, etc. So second layer is going to be a bit of vignetting. Vignetting is important because it's going to sort of tuck in, sort of bring everything in, and also a bit of contrasting. I've done it with Nik software. If you don't have this plugin, you should get it. It's called Nik Collection. It's a bit expensive, but who gives a shit? It's important. If you're going to make money with this, get your tools. That is essential. Yeah, get your tools. Don't bitch about the price. Just pay it and do it, because you need it. Another layer is going to be a bit more toning and contrasting. Then we have vignetting of the background, because I thought that It's a little bit too washed out and pulls too much attention, so I sort of close it down. This is contrasting, and it's done in Camera Raw. I'm actually using clarity for it, and I'm doing it, you know, selectively. So I'm actually using a brush in Adobe Camera Raw. So if I go here, I'm just gonna simply click on the brush and, you know, use clarity with the brush settings. So that's also really important to do, because it's going to bring attention to details. You see, like, all these things start popping, right? Now this one is toning, and I do it with infinite color, which costs about 120 bucks, but it's fantastic, especially if you know what you're doing with toning in Photoshop, because you can very easily adjust all these layers. But if you don't want to buy it, you know, just play with all these color lookup, gradient map, you know, you can find them all down here in these menus. So, you know, selective colors, color balance, curves, etc. These are essential tools for creating drama, you know, interest in your image, coloring, toning, everything, right? So you can do all these things with these tools. So you see, it just gets a bit more, you know, a bit more interesting tone of it, like a cyan overcast, which is great. And then this is really important. Now I'll show you two renders that I created in Blender. So let me just turn this mask off by shift clicking on it, and this is render number 1 and this is render number 2, and I want you to notice this part in here. The reason why I render it twice is because I rotated lights in Photoshop in Blender, okay? Because I wanted this to be the main focus, but I also noticed that when I did this, I had really hard, you know, highlight on this part here. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to remove this and sort of I rotated the lights and make it a little bit more blend. And then what I did, I simply added the mask, I inverted it, and I simply you know, kind of tapped with a brush in this spot. So I removed, sort of covered this brightness, you know, of this area, and also opened up a bit of shadows in here because it's a bit too dark in my opinion. You need to think ahead. If you're gonna be editing this, there's not enough detail in here, okay? So that's what I've done. Background is done separately, okay? This is a background. I did it because I wanted to add filter. I wanted to add motion blur to it. So this is the original floor without the filter, right? It's blurred because I used depth of field, but at the same time, so you know, I focus on the, let me show you in Blender, right? So I focus on the model here, and the floor is underneath. It's where is the floor? I think it's this one. I think I don't have this save actually, but let me just Alt-R this to reset the rotation, move it here underneath. And GZ, I drop it really down, yeah, so, you know, has to be lower, because when you're shooting from the top, let me show you in Look Dive, right? When you're shooting from the top, okay, this is my camera here on the top. Just let Blender update for a sec. Now, if I check camera settings, I'm at 50mm, right? 50mm is actually the way we perceive the world as humans, which is not really a great magnification, okay? Telephoto lens starts about 70mm, okay? So now, to be able to blur this thing, you really need to put it far away, okay? Far away, because how camera works is that the higher the focal length, okay, so, you know, 200, 300mm, the higher the blur. However, the distance between the model and the distance between the model in the background, so from camera to model and from model to background, is really important. The closer the camera is to the model and the further the background is away from the model, the bigger the blur, okay? So if you want to achieve really blurry background, you don't really have to change camera settings. You simply can, you know, bring the foreground, the background closer, okay? And if you want to make it more blurry, you just move it away. Also, if you want to increase the blur, you simply increase the focal length, which will create like a sort of a compacting effect, okay? Everything's going to get compact, sort of collapsing, okay, visually. And another important thing is that I actually use depth of field and I focused on the model. So when I do this manually, right, I don't use this pipette bullshit because it's bullshit. What you need to do, you see, you need to focus manually. So how you do this is you set your f-stop to, let's say, I don't know, 1.4 or something. Let's just make this background blurry, so maybe 1.1. And now you need to focus on something really that's, you can see the sharpness, and simply hold shift and, scroll this one with your mouse, and until you are really sure that this, this stuff here is tack sharp, yeah? And then you'll see the background's gonna get blurred automatically, okay? Now, setting this with a pipette is tricky because it depends on where the origin point is of the object you're focusing on. And most of the time is not accurate. You want to have the precise focus, especially at very shallow depth of field. I have a specific video on how depth of field works, so go ahead and watch it. I'm gonna drop a link in the video description. But basically I do it manually to achieve most precise results. So this is how I got this background, and the reason why I rendered it separately, because when I blur it with motion blur, right, with this one, so it's you go here to filter, you go to blur and motion blur. When I blur this with the model in it, right, you will see what's gonna happen. Okay, I'll show you on this example here. So let me just grab the top layer. Let me show you what's gonna happen if I'm gonna actually blur this thing with the model, right? So if I'm gonna blur it with the model, I'm gonna get this. And even if, okay, I'm going to select the outline of my model with control. So I'm gonna select it from the layer when there is no background, and sort of add a mask and control I to invert it. You see these smudges around. This is a problem, okay? Because your image, remember, the whole image is blurred, is motion blurred, which means it's leaking outside the edges. The way to do it properly is to render background separately and the model separately, blur the background, and then when you combine everything into one layer, okay, so when you combine everything into one layer, you go to blur brush, okay, you set it to some kind of a lower value, and then you just simply blur the edges of the model, okay, especially in places when you don't really want people to see everything tack sharp, so like edges of the model, okay, and this will blend it seamlessly with the kind of like a blurred background, okay, and that's how you do it properly, right? This is this is the proper way of compositing images in Photoshop. Now the last thing I've done, right, probably most of people will not notice this, but if I'm going to where is it? Okay, when I'm going to turn it on and off, you see how strong this element on the bottom is, and I don't like it because it pulls a lot of attention. So what I've done, I dulled it down, and now it's actually corresponding in strength of contrast with the top, okay? So my eyes will kind of get bounced from this way. I'm not gonna get dragged to it, but gonna get bounced from it because it's actually dark in the corners, right? So you're gonna bounce between corners because it will pull you to a corner, but you're gonna bounce back because it's not important and it's blurry. Your eyes will never go to, or are less prone to go to areas which are blurry because they're unimportant. Brain usually renders them unimportant. The reason for it is that when you look at something in real life, corner vision, you see that, but it's blurry, right? So it's unimportant. You're always focusing in a very narrow cone. So this is the same when you look at the image. This will create an illusion and sort of kind of tell your brain not to look in here. But if it's too much contrast, your brain will look there, okay? Which is why I actually dialed it down. So things like this are important, and the only thing that really annoys me in this image, and I probably should have removed it, I didn't see it actually, is this bit here, okay? This thing here, the squared ones. So the way I would remove it, right? You could try to remove it with content aware tool. So what we could do is, let me just see, Shift Control Alt and E to create stem visible layer, and let's just try to fix it with content aware. I don't know if it's gonna work, but you hold Alt to deduct from selection and hold Shift to add to selection. I'm gonna do it with a mouse, so my selection is not really great, but edit content aware, and let's just see how this works. Yeah, it's a little bit better, but it's still too bright. So what I could do is simply and grab a brush and switch it to darken, and then maybe make it flow, maybe 2, and select this color here and change a blend to luminosity, and I'm simply going to darken it down. It's a little bit too strong. Maybe let's do it with clone stamp tool, probably gonna be better because we have grain in here. So do something like this. It's gonna be a bit blurry, but I'm not doing actually a great job right now. And this is a bit better, you know. You could sort of combine these two together. Okay, merge layers, right? And, you know, drop the fill, okay, a little bit. So it's there, but it's not that visible, right? See what I mean? So now it's a little bit less. It just pulls a bit of attention, kind of annoys me, but you know what I mean? So things like this, you know, you want to be very pedantic in terms of elements in your image, because remember that the main focus is your model, and the way you adjust the lights and sort of play with the lights doesn't have to be definitive in Blender, because you can create more than one render and simply combine them in Photoshop. That's how, for example, are all these light painting photographs created, right? Where there's pitch black and someone opens the camera on a very long shutter and just literally paints stuff with torches, okay, or flashlights, and then combines all this in Photoshop. The same in here, we literally paint with light. So we put light where we want it, and if we cannot get precise and really accurate lighting conditions, just render 2 or 3 images. You know, who gives a shit? The most important part is how it looks at the end. Now I'm looking at it, this part here is a little bit too bright. So for what I would do, for example, right, I would go to curves or levels and simply drop it down like this, right? And then Control I to invert the mask and change it to luminosity, because you don't want to affect colors. Go here, grab a brush, switch it to white, and with a low flow, just tap it, okay, and dim it down. See? Oh wait, it's on dark, and that's why it doesn't work. Jesus Christ. Let's go to 3, and then just dim it down. Let me see now. There you go. See what I mean? And now you can remove it. Double click here, and by holding Alt and splitting these sliders, you can remove it from darker tones, so it will affect only bright tones, okay? So it will not affect the dark areas, but only the bright areas, right? And you can just, you know, kind of bring it a little bit down, maybe make it a bit shiny, because there's going to be a reflection, but not as strong. And I'm being pedantic at the moment, but look at the difference between these two corners and also the front. This kind of tends to be the brightest spot in the image. Now it isn't, and now it's kind of, you know, very uniform and relaxed. And you need to look at every single, you know, point in your image and kind of think whether you just arrived or you're not there yet, you know what I mean? So you could just keep playing with an image for a long time. Another thing is that in Photoshop you can remove stuff like this, you see, this bit here. This is some pool, I don't know what it is actually. The geo is clean in the image, I mean in Blender, so I don't know what it is. Maybe some kind of a weird artifact during rendering. Stuff like this is really hard to fix, so you might actually want to go with a clone stamp tool and fix it with clone stamp tool. Let's make it a little bit stronger, so there you go, right here too. And it's gonna be a massive difference, you see, right? So yeah, like I said, you know, all these small bits are really important. Anyway guys, that's it for the video. I hope it helps you out. Thank you for watching, and catch you in the next one.